Hello, and welcome to rePRO Film Festival by mama.film. I'm Leila Meadow-Connor.
I'm Mallory Martin.
And I'm Debbie Samples.
As the founders of rePRO, we thank you for joining us for these call to action conversations. We want to thank the village of people who have made this festival possible, our filmmakers, special guests, partners, sponsors, and of course you, our audience. You've let your time, talents, and expertise to help amplify the voices that are so crucial in the fight for reproductive justice and bodily autonomy.
When you purchase tickets and donate to rePRO, you become an active participant in change, as all net ticket sales and accompanying donations support our 5 beneficiary organizations. We thank you for participating in these vitally important call to action conversations and hope you leave feeling empowered to be your own advocate in the world.
Please keep women's reproductive rights at the forefront of your mind as we enter this critical election season.
We're pleased to present the Abortion Care Rights and Access Call to Action conversation. We'd also like to highlight the A is for Clinic Escorts series comic book, a beautiful and compelling compilation edited by New Yorker artist Emily Flake. It tells the story of abortion clinic escorts and illustrates literally the realities of being on the front lines, escorting patients through hostile crowds into clinics so they can receive needed medical care. Please welcome our moderator, writer, actor, and activist, Amber Tamblyn.
Thank you, rePRO team. My name is Amber Tamblyn, and I am joined today by some exceptional writers, filmmakers, and activists to talk about their work with and for abortion care rights and access. As a reminder, this call to action conversation is to review the current state of the pro-choice movement, including who has access and, more importantly, who doesn't, and the role younger generations are playing in paving the way for a better future for women of all kinds. So joining me today are 4 phenomenal women who have each worked at the pivotal intersections of abortion access, funding, political control, and art. Melisa Resch, did I say that right?
You got it. Perfect.
Yes, killing it already. Is the director and writer of the fantastic short film, The Line. I have so much to say about this movie. I loved it. I loved most of all, to say really quick, that you centered this kind of immediate romantic love story in the center of the hell of what these organizers and activists were going through, which I feel like is so real for a women's experience. We also have Dane, who is the director, writer, and producer, and editor and animator of the short film Mizuko, which is the most powerful, emotive, beautiful biofilm almost. I love this movie so much. I can't wait to talk about it. We also have Janet Goldwater, who's the director and producer of the short film Abortion Helpline. This is Lisa, which is also an equally extraordinary look at women at call centers who are trying to help low-income women and women of all kinds deal with how to get access for abortions. And last but not least, we have Odile Shalit, who is the executive director of the Bridget Alliance. Odile develops and oversees the organization's services, builds relationships with abortion funds and volunteer networks, and manages a team of compassionate intake coordinators. I'm going to use that term, by the way, compassionate intake coordinators, on my husband. I'm going to get him to see how to do that. That would be great. So each of these films addresses the complex themes of abused power when it comes to controlling a woman's right to her own bodily autonomy and choices. The Line examines who gets to control outrage and protest over a woman's body, while the film Mizuko examines who gets to decide when life does or does not begin, or when it does not get to end. And in the docu-film Abortion Helpline, This is Lisa, we see who gets to control the money and the legal and legislative policies behind women's access to reproductive health care across the board. These films are beautiful, heart-wrenching, necessary, gutting stories which give a voice and a face to women who are the recipients of abortion, who struggle to afford abortions financially, emotionally, and psychologically, who fight on the front lines of clinics and also fall in love there, and who are the future of this conversation. So I would like to start with the film The Line. Melisa, tell us about The Line and why making this film was such a necessary and unique part of the story that we so rarely get to see, which is sort of outside the clinic and the people who are protecting a clinic and a woman's right to choose.
Well, The Line is my story. And so I think that for organizers, it makes total sense. And I think beyond that, I think for so many tens of thousands of people who protested this summer, they understand that kind of interconnected nature of the emotion that you feel and the organizing that you're doing. And I think all of that is, it's real hard to separate. And so I know that everyone may think of a protest as this terrible, fraught-filled, awful experience, but there's so many moments that are incredible, and there are moments of celebration and love and WAP and sex and all this stuff. That's what life is to me. That's living. And so I just wanted to capture it.
It's beautiful. And Kira, will you tell us just a little bit about the creative inspiration for your film, for Mizuko, and the idea behind you're an extraordinary artist, visual artist, and fine artist. And I'm just curious to know where the inspiration for this story came from, if you want to tell us a little bit about it, and also how your mind works to sort of put all those beautiful visual pieces together.
Yeah, so Mizuko is also my own story, and after I got an abortion, a lot of things about the abortion debate, I became a lot more passionate about the abortion debate, but more than that, I realized there are huge gaps in conversation when it comes to really talking about the kind of nitty-gritty details about what we think about when life starts and when it ends, and how we all define that line or lack of line. And yeah, I just really wanted to explore that, and that's when I found this Buddhist ritual that talks about the beginning of life in a very different way from Christianity or atheism. So I knew I wanted to make a film about it, and I approached my co-director, Caitlin Rebello, who had also made kind of experimental animated films, and together we kind of created this visual language for how to represent that kind of really heavy conversation about life and death against the very kind of real and cold experience of having an abortion. So.
Yeah, I love that so much about the film, and the way in which I think it also brought out the inner life of a woman, of that experience, of everything from before it and after it. And I think so much with these conversations around women's reproductive health care and around abortion is so focused on the actual procedure itself and people's controls and thoughts over what they believe is right or not right. And we tend to forget that there are whole lived experiences directly before that happens, and certainly directly after it happens. And it's a great film that sort of resensitizes people to that experience. Janet, okay, so I found myself watching your film, as I sort of mentioned earlier, Abortion Helpline, This is Lisa. I found myself watching it, and I was filled with anger and sadness for the women who were calling into the help center, who had nowhere to go, who could not afford the procedures, women who had been raped, women with fetal anomalies that are not compatible with life, women who were disowned by their partners who impregnated them, their family members. It was like an expose of women on the brink, and you really got to hear their stories. And I also felt so deeply for the women who were taking those calls, who had to deliver the news that there wasn't enough money or funding to get that procedure. And so what's the next choice? Can you just tell us a little bit about the research for this film? Most specifically, for anyone who's not familiar with the Hyde Amendment. I knew what the Hyde Amendment was, but the statistics in this short film are very jarring and upsetting. And I wonder if you would just talk about that a little bit, and how that has affected not just, women of all kinds, but very specifically women of color.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the film Amber's describing, being so angry watching, is set at an abortion helpline in Philadelphia, but it could be set at any one of the more than 70 abortion helplines that are situated all over the country. What abortion funds do is they fill the gap for women who overnight need to raise a couple $100s to end an abortion. I mean, to end a pregnancy. The large majority of these women are low income, people of color. The majority are already mothers. They are, and more than 50% are covered by Medicaid. So you wonder, why doesn't their insurance pay for the abortion? Well, in 17 states it does. In the other 33 states, and Pennsylvania is one of those, it's Medicaid is prohibited from covering their abortion because of something called the Henry Hyde Amendment. And the Henry Hyde Amendment was passed exactly 3 years after Roe v. Wade. So it was just an immediate response by a Republican legislator to say, let's figure out who we can prevent from having abortions. And he explicitly says, we can't prevent all of them, but at least we can keep poor women from having abortions. And he says that on the floor of the House, and that legislation has been re-upped every year since then, and is still in effect. So what you see at the helplines are women who, as a consequence of this legislation, are calling in to try to gather enough funds so that they can have their procedure.
Yeah, and speaking of those procedures and all of this work, which each of you have sort of detailed in all of your films, whether, again, that's the socioeconomical work, the emotional work, the psychological work, the organizer activist work, or the political work, is, something I think that's so central to what you do there at the Bridget Alliance. And I was wondering if you would talk to us a little bit about what the Bridget Alliance does, what they're doing now, why it is such an important organization in sort of the center of the battleground that is reproductive choice.
Sure. So, and thank you to the filmmakers. I have to just take a moment and say the range of topics that you all covered, and the nuance and how many different perspectives on abortion access and the experience of abortion that you all managed to capture is just enormous. And actually shared them with my intake coordinator today, and they and I were just like really struck by that, and really appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you for telling these stories and your stories. So the Bridget Alliance is a newer organization. We actually just turned 2 years old. We're a nationwide organization that we sort of identify as a practical support organization. So we specifically tap in to provide the wraparound support to individuals that need to travel to get to their abortion care. And specifically, we work with individuals and families who need to travel for later abortion care that is only available for particular, or I should say there's 6 different locations in the US where that care is accessible. And we work with 4 of those locations, and they are in New Mexico, Colorado, DC, and Maryland. We'll travel from anywhere in the US to those locations. The clients that we serve are low income, they are women of color, they are undocumented immigrants, they are minors, they identify as LGBTQ, and the needs that we seek to address specifically are how you actually leave your home, get to care that is states away safely, get your care that goes over the course of 2 to 3 to 4 days, and then get back home. And so the services that we provide are logistical and financial. We are covering the cost of transportation, lodging, meals, the expenses that are associated with travel, like gas and tolls, parking, any of these little things that if you come from privilege, you might underestimate the significance of. But for someone who is low income, those might be, or the inability to cover those costs or arrange those logistics, let alone have a familiarity with travel, might entirely prevent you from being able to access that care. Care that at the stage of a later abortion is also largely, as I mentioned, less locally available. So it's the providers are fewer and the care is more expensive. So where we sit, as you know, as is highlighted in the line really nicely, is in this ecosystem of organizations that are working to kind of connect these geographic and metaphorical dots between policy, between providers, practice, and patients, all to try to alleviate these logistical barriers and financial obstacles to access care. We work in tandem with abortion funds. They are often who are referring to us. And it is when it is in that partnership, in that collaboration across states, across this country, that we're able to help people get to their care, but not without enormous cost and time and stress to our clients and the individuals that we work with primarily, as well as to those organizations, as Melisa depicted really beautifully in capturing the experience of being escorts. The layers of what comprises an actual ecosystem that successfully helps someone access an abortion care is enormous. You know, we're talking about legal advocates, we're talking about legislative advocates, we're talking about abortion funds, we're talking about volunteer escorts and hosts and organizations like ours that are arranging and planning travel. That is what it takes for many people to actually be able to have an abortion in the US right now. It is enormous.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge responsibility right now. I guess I just want to open up to anyone who wants to talk about, I think so much of the time we're so used to talking about our creative life, our creative work, its function, and, you know, being able to tell these stories, or, you know, Odile, in your case, like being able to give support to these stories in the way that you do. How has that, how has that impacted you, both in a positive way, but also maybe a negative way? How has this been difficult for you, even making a film about it, or, you know, doing this activist work on a day-to-day basis? I think it's important for us to be able to share those stories in these spaces, because so much of the time we talk about, you know, the work, but then we don't talk about what surrounds the work, which is how we feel. So if there's anyone that wants to talk about that, whether that was the process of making your film, whether that made you angry or felt cathartic or felt freeing, or anything in between.
Well, that's a really great question. It brings so many thoughts, but you know, I think for political people, for social justice people, the pull between charity and change is this constant pull, and I don't say charity in a negative way. But the pull between wanting to help in the moment, which is to, you know, what an abortion fund does. It takes money from people that have it and, you know, moves it to people who are in need. Is extremely gratifying and important. But then there's the sense of, wow, all these resources and energy are going into something that shouldn't even be happening. Like, you know, these women should, you know, these individuals should be, you know, able to have health care just like everyone else. So change is all of a sudden, you know, as an artist, you realize, like, that's my avenue. Like, that's where I can actually speak to more people and, you know, and try to ramp it up so that, you know, we're not just constantly fighting the same battles and, you know, and having to, you know, to salvage individuals one by one. We should be making systemic change. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, I think these stories are, you know, are a good way to reach that audience that can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, but I do feel like, you know, it was shocking to me when I made my short. Majority of people didn't know what clinic defense was. And
I didn't know a lot about it. It taught me a lot. I had no idea that there was, I mean, I learned so much from all three of the films, but I didn't know. Continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like that's part of why it was necessary. I think it's been so marginalized. I mean, they've stripped so much from our movement. Like, you can't say abortion anymore. It's like, what the fuck? It has to be coded in reproductive rights. And obviously, yes, like, we want all our rights, but like, can I say that word? I think, it was like, making my film was great because I feel like I think, especially with you know, stories that intersect, medicine doesn't work, you know. So like Janet's like, well, I totally agree. Like, why are we, you know, utilizing so much of our resources, money, time for something that should exist? Well, yeah, we feel like that about everything, right? Like race, you know, everything, sexuality. So I feel like, to me, medicine doesn't work. You have to tell a story that will pull people in. And I think the way for me to do that was to focus in on one love story in the midst of this bigger story. Yeah. And that way, you know, it could pull you through.
Mel, I also loved about that. I mean, I think if people get to see this film, you know, I did some research afterwards because I realized that there was some kind of line of defense outside of clinics, but I didn't know much about how that operated. And watching some of the videos, which is not really a rabbit hole I would normally let myself go down because it's tough to watch, but there is nothing about your portrayal of it in the film that's exaggerated. That's how rough and awful they are. And you forget, like, even I forget that they bomb clinics, they kill people. They kill us for doing this work. It's upsetting. So your film was a great reminder of that, of the danger of it, but also the solidarity and the, like, no fucks given at all. And I love that about the you know, the people that were represented in being those escorts. It was really great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I feel like that is, you know, that's a lot of the movement on the ground. Mm-hmm. Those are the people who have kind of the mettle to stand up to those types of bullies. And we need them. And I'm so grateful for them, you know.
Yeah. Kira, anything for you as far as the creation of your film and your feelings?
Yeah. I just want to go off that one point Melisa just said about, like, how, you know, the word abortion is now kind of grouped together with reproductive rights, and how, I don't know, I think what's tough about fighting this battle and the need to fight for it so strongly, so much more strongly than we'd hoped for, is that a lot of the nuances get hidden because we have to prioritize, you know, just getting the access. So I think my film came from this kind of frustration that in having to fight for it in this kind of big push, like, no, it's okay. This is an okay thing. We all need to fight for this thing. We forget that it's also not okay in a lot of ways, and it does hurt, and it does feel, for a lot of people, it does feel like murder. And so, you know, even though it's murder that you have reconciled with and come to feel okay about, there's still so much emotion there that's just not dealt with. And, you know, I wish the US had, you know, we didn't have to fight this fight, and we had more, I feel like, you know, emotional care on top of all of the things that Odile mentioned, that's necessary to fight. Emotional care just seems like so, you know, like back burner, just not even possible right now. So yeah, I wish there were more conversations about how difficult it is and how nuanced the experiences are when you actually have to make that choice.
I remember when the hashtag was trending, where it was my abortion story. That was it was like last year or something, I think. I know that I shared a story of having an abortion. And And I remember the author, Rebecca Tracer, saying, you know, for some women, each experience is deeply personal and deeply different. And for some women, it's an absolute relief. And that there should be space allowed for each of those feelings. And I totally agree with you, Kira, and that we often don't ascribe enough space for emotional intelligence. This is so deeply tied to misogyny and sexism, and the fact that we as a culture in the entire world are told that rational thought is more important than emotional thought. So sort of devaluing the entire population, half of the gender of the entire world, which includes trans experience and anybody that identifies with the feminine, that the gut instinct, that the belief of your emotional intention has no value and should not be, it's tied in with trust of women, with it's one of the reasons why we're always saying women are not electable, because they're not trustworthy. It's a long, disgusting, sad narrative that dates back to, you know, Greek and Roman times. So I just completely agree with you, and that the emotional solitude that women are forced into, of not being able to express the way these things feel. And especially if you've had an abortion and you wanted it and it was a relief, or as you said, that you know that it's murder, that it was a murder, but it's your murder. And as someone who was given the body to create or end life, it seems to me that is a very important part of the conversation of who gets to make those decisions.
Can I add something too?
Yeah, of course.
So the other thing too is, in making our film, we really wanted to speak to people. I think we forget, being on the pro-choice side, that people who are pro-life aren't just the ones who are aggressive and violent and, you know, standing at anti-abortion protests, but there are plenty of people who might feel, you know, just really silently guilty, or really just feel like there's not a space to be able to feel, because the pro-choice side is so kind of focused on the surgical procedure aspect of it. They feel like, why would I be so cold? I feel like there would be less incentive for those kinds of people to join in on the side that treats abortion as just a surgical procedure. So I think my co-director and I really wanted to be able to speak to those kind of people in between, and kind of, you know, just provide a conversation about healing and about that aspect of it.
I really appreciate this conversation, especially because I used to be a social worker at an abortion provider for years, and my conversations every day, all day long, were with people in the midst of their decision-making process, or already like pre-procedure, starting their healing process. And, you know, what I appreciate about the nuance in all of your films, but especially yours, Kira, is that there's a nuance in that decision-making, and there's also the nuance in the fact that this is also a moment in life. So even if you're resolute, even if you know what you wish to do, what you need to do with your body, that doesn't necessarily mean that all the other factors that are happening in that moment aren't impacting you emotionally. The fact that you had to stop your life to go to a provider that you might not know, that you might not have a relationship with, that you might need to wait in line, that you have had to hustle for days or weeks to get your funding together, to figure out how to even get there and figure out childcare. All those things, even when you are sure of your decision, can bring about an emotional experience that needs to have space. And the range of those experiences and emotional responses, and bringing art into that, I think is so very critical, and why it's so awesome that you guys are doing the work that you're doing. Again, you're fantastic. But yeah.
I think I've done clinic escort work, and I also am part of a practical support network in Philadelphia that works with travel and logistics, on a local level, similar to what the Bridget Alliance does. And it's always interesting to me, Kira, that how many women I've worked with who say, I don't even believe in this. And so what they're they're expressing, such a, a complex, personal moment, right? Right in real time. They're doing something that they know they need to do for their family, for themselves, whatever. But there's this deep conflict, and it's not, it's not articulated as well as it is in your film, but but I feel that ambivalence. So it's beautiful to see it in a film. I've actually wondered how your film plays in Japan, where there is less of a binary kind of pro-choice, pro-life, there's not this conflict. I mean, they've reimagined the issue.
I actually haven't had a screening in Japan yet. The film is still going around festivals, and it's been tough with COVID a lot of festivals in Japan got canceled. So I'm really hoping for that to be able to see how it plays out. But it's tough because, in Japan too, it's not perfect. And in the film, it kind of presents this sort of Japanese culture. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, like Japan's great. But there's plenty of problems in reproductive rights in general in Japan. And it's funny because I had to get Plan B while I was living in Japan. And it was the most difficult experience of my entire life. It was like, they don't have it in pharmacies. You have to go to a doctor. And it was a Sunday night. So it's just like, it was very intense. And then I was kind of shamed by the doctors there. So, it made me realize that there's nowhere that's really a perfect utopia for women to be able to get access to these things. But, at the same time, I think abortion, the way that people think about abortion and life and death is really tied to a more Buddhist and Shinto religious background compared to, I think in the US, there's so many subconscious ways that having a Christian society has kind of dictated the way we feel about things. And I just think that the film would play completely differently in Japan, where it's people feel less strongly about it, but at the same time, people aren't necessarily so vocal about their personal problems. But I'm hoping for a screening here. Definitely.
I also feel like the US, here in the States, we have lacked, forget a moral compass. Yeah, there's been a huge missing piece of that, but we lack a spiritual foundation in a lot of ways here, which I think was one of the most beautiful parts of that film, because it did remind you that this conversation of life and death and the ownership of who gets to dictate when those things start or end. There is a freedom when you are tied in a certain way to having a spiritual life. And I think here so much is dictated by, religion, but also, social media. And you also have seen it here forever with sort of the salaciousness of celebrity and fame, and people sort of use that as a kind of spiritual guide. You've got, so you have all of that. And I think it's something that that's really missing about the foundation of understanding the way women make their decisions and come to their decisions, which is so much deeper and more complex than what a white Republican lawmaker from fill in the blank would say about, like, this is the black or white narrative about why women are choosing this. I think if we were a country with greater spiritual guidance and depth, we would maybe look at it differently in a certain way.
Yeah, and shame certainly is not a useful emotion, given that I think right now it's one in 4 women of reproductive age will have an abortion. So we don't need to have a quarter of people, with an eighth of people in the country carrying around shame.
Can I ask each of you, you know, we talk about these difficult subjects, but, you know, what gives you hope? Because things don't feel very hopeful right now. And once in a while, I like to ask this question, and I feel like it might be good for people who are watching this conversation tonight to know how you feel about it as artists, but as women who've had abortions, who've been through it all, who've seen it all, who've been on the front lines. What gives you hope, especially in this time that we're living in right now?
I mean, I did I cut you off? Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay. I think the most hopeful thing for me in recent time is Minneapolis, and, you know, our American that we had, which has, you know, continued to American Summer. But I think, to me, that gives me the most hope in general. I think, to be honest, you know, I think those kinds of uprisings and social unrest and protests are going to help us hold on to our rights as women as well. It's not cut and dried. This is in this lane, and that is going to help all of us. And I think continuing that movement and lending our voices in whatever ways we can is going to be crucial. Like, I think it really, people really got to show up, and white feminists have got to show up loud. I think that's really the only way for us to change and grow a movement that, you know, historically has had so many issues with integration and in a real way. Not that the people in our movement don't fight for the rights of Black and brown women and poor women. That happens, but in terms of representation and people identifying with us, we need that. We need to continue to grow this movement to expand and fight for our rights.
Yeah, it was not lost on me, Mel, in your movie that the escorts were, you know, queer people, trans people, non-binary people, mostly people of color. I noted that heavily, which was sort of, I think, a large statement about who does show up consistently, whether or not it's about their body, whether or not it affects them and shows up for other people. And that's like a huge takeaway that so many of us need to focus on.
Yeah, those are my people. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed it. I'm glad that it showed.
Yeah. Anyone else? What gives you hope?
Well, I totally second everything that Melisa said. Great big picture. Sort of on a smaller logistical level, the thing that gives me hope within the access issue is the increase in self-managed abortion. And I think it's just something we all have to educate ourselves about and educate other people about.
What is self-managed abortion?
Self-managed abortion.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Oh, so you can have a surgical abortion, or you can take pills if you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was the term for it.
Yeah, and well, so if you do it with a doctor, you're just having a medical abortion. But if you do it at home without a doctor, same pills,
right?
It's self-managed, and it's increasing. It's increasing around the world. And it's, you know, when you see the scene outside of the clinic in The Line in the film, it's you know, that doesn't have to have. We don't have to go to clinics. I mean, this, like, you know, the majority of abortions could be being performed safely at home. And I think in a post, if God forbid there is a post-Roe world where states, you know, can outlaw abortion, we're all going to have to, you know, get busy, you know, educating ourselves and people about how that's going to happen. So that's
TikTok. They already know about those internet abortions. They're all over it. So
yes, they are.
I totally agree, though. I mean, I'm making a joke, but I'm serious.
Yeah, I would echo everything that's been said as well. I think also adding that I'm really grateful and relieved to see that there's now a conversation around the fact that for some, they already exist in a post-Roe world. So that is a reality for many individuals in America, especially in rural states, especially in rural areas, especially in the Southeast and the Midwest, and especially for Black and Brown people. That conversation is one that we are now having, that these barriers are so enormous that for many, they're unable to get to their care. And that, you know, framing this all within reproductive and social justice is something that's becoming more common, which is an enormous change from just like a year ago. That and how it's bred all this incredible innovation in the network that we're a part of gives me a lot of hope. And I just really want to also acknowledge that in the line, I feel like the representation of not just who cares, but who has abortions, seeing all of that reflected in such a substantial way. And what's more, why people volunteer, why they escort. I think, was it Gigi was their name? Talking to Amber about like why they were escorting and spending their Saturday mornings doing that. And for me, that was so profound and so wonderful to hear and to see, because having that conversation with friends about why I do the work that I do and helping them to understand that it's not just my work and my friends' work and my colleagues' work, but it's their work too. And having that story be told is just really incredible. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I know it's rough when they're like, you don't get paid, what? Like, but I don't, but let me tell you why you should come anyway.
Exactly. Kara, what gives you hope?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I keep coming back to is the very first day where my co-director and I pitched our film. We had to pitch for funding, and after our pitch, we didn't know if we got the funding yet, and we were just so nervous, and it was like the most nervous I've ever been. But we were standing in line for the women's bathroom, and there were all these people that came up to us and started talking about how excited they were about it and how much they related to it. And since then, with the making of our film and the screening of it at a lot of festivals, we've had this repeated experience of people reaching out to us and saying, you know, how much they relate to it. So that's been the most impactful thing. That's all I wanted in the making of this film. And communities like this, you know, I feel like 15, 20 years ago, this would have been so difficult for people to make short like artistic documentaries about abortion and have it be seen and have conversations around it, and have it so easily just from home like this. I think, you know, like Gen Z kind of freaks me out sometimes. They're like, you know, people who grew up like with the internet. I'm kind of on that cusp, but there's a lot of people who are so open-minded in Gen Z because they're like really grew up learning how many different types of people there are in the world. And I don't know, I'm hopeful that I think in the future people will be better at standing their ground and knowing, standing their ground, I guess.
Standing your ground.
Kira, can I ask you a technical question? How long did it take you to animate your movie? So
it was rough. You know, because we did frame by frame animation, and we got our grant in January of 2019, and we finished the film in around October of 2019. So, you know, frame by frame animation I feel like usually takes years and a large team of people, but it was just me, my co-director, and then 2 freelance watercolor animators who were helping. And we did sort of sections of it, and so usually there'd be kind of like a assembly line of, you know, cleanup animators and such, but we just did sort of chunks of watercolor animation. And so my co-director and I rented a studio in Bushwick and we just sat in there for hours and hours painting. And it's funny because it's like painting, you feel like it's supposed to be this really calming process, but we're like frantically painting and frantically animating. So yeah, it took a long time. And then, you know, after that we had to go to Japan and then shoot all of the Super 8 sequences in Japan. So I would say that animation took maybe 3 or 4 months total.
Wow.
Something like that.
That's shorter than I thought. That is, you guys.
It's very rushed, but yeah.
It looks amazing. It's so beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Do any of you have any, you know, maybe parting words of advice for, you know, any artists, any women, young women who are struggling, who might have had an abortion, who are in the process of getting one, just anyone that might see this conversation and want to hear from some women who are very much sitting in their power, which is all of you. So any advice that you would give to anyone out there that's watching?
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
It's kind of separate from advice a little bit, but what my co-director and I have been thinking about since the beginning of this film is how cool it would be to have places in the US where we could have musical queer rituals, and sort of like adapted musical queer rituals, but places where people who've had abortions can come and make their own statue and have their own grief and go through that. And, you know, with COVID, our plans have gotten kind of derailed. We had sort of places in mind to do it. But yeah, I just want to, I don't want to give up on that. And I think it would be a really good way to kind of spread that idea of how women can find spaces to heal in their own way, even if it's not in that way. So that's something that I'm looking at.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I don't know if I have, I don't know if I have advice to give, if I'm that person in that position, but I think, you know, whatever it is you see in your mind or you're thinking of, you're not crazy, it's probably amazing. Make it, put it on an iPhone, write it in the notes on your phone. I don't know, whatever you can do, get it out of yourself and then go from there. And there's no limits, honestly. I think you have to take whatever you have, whether it's a love story, it's a painful experience, it's sitting on a phone for 8 hours, you know, talking to women through stuff, and you have to get it out of you and into the world. So hopefully another person will see themselves reflected in it, and hopefully you will be able then to grow and make some other amazing shit.
Make some amazing shit.
Yeah.
Odile, Janet?
What they said. Yeah. No, I just, you know, we have a responsibility to, you know, to share our stories, you know, and that's Melisa and, you know, Kira shared their stories. You know, I'm not autobiographical by nature, so I, you know, wanted to give voice to other people. So we're all in it together. Amber, what got you involved with this work?
Oh goodness, I you know, I grew up as a child actress and became a writer. Always was a writer. Always was a poet. Poetry is sort of the root of everything that I've ever done. And I think growing up in my business, in my industry, as an object for most of my life was very challenging, but then also very interesting. I think from an inspirational point as a writer, to be able to write about some of the things I've experienced and imagine worlds, both the interior lives of women, but also the exterior lives of them, in books and essays and critical work that I've done. So, and I know my last book, Era of Ignition, I literally, the first paragraph was talking about not only having an abortion, but getting an abortion within a few months of getting married. So, you know, by all accounts, I should have totally had a kid. I was the right age. I had good financial stability from my life as a child actress. I had a great husband. I was not ready. I had a lot of deep, deep wounds and issues that I had to deal with from the entertainment business. Because if I didn't, I knew that that was going to come out towards any child that I would have. I was still a child, and I needed to do a lot of work before I could become a mom. And I am a mom now, and I'm grateful that I, you know, was able to have that experience. That's a real privilege to be able to go in New York City here and walk into an abortion clinic and do that. It's a real privilege, and that is not lost on me at all.
And to your question that you asked, I wanted to just sort of reflect what all of you have said and say that there is a way for everyone to get involved, whether they've had an abortion or not. There's voting, there is volunteering for local abortion funds or practical support organizations or volunteer networks. There's sharing your story, whether it be just to yourself or to your friends or to the world, however you choose to do that, or to share your healing practices, that there is, that those options are limitless. And that there, to anyone who's trying to have an abortion that might be watching this, that there are supports that exist. There is an enormous world out there of people who care very deeply for you and about about figuring out how to help you in a way that you need, and to not dictate that for you. Mm-hmm. And so find your local abortion fund, find your local volunteer network, find us, we're here to support you.
I love that. Find us, we're here to support you. I feel like that is the message across the board for women of all kinds, women with an X over that A. Odile, Janet, Kira, Melisa, thank you guys so much for this great talk. This was really wonderful. It kind of made my evening. Maybe I don't need rosé now. I'm lying, I do. No, this was so wonderful. We want to thank you, our guests, and our audience for participating in this call to action conversation. For a recap of the organizations you can support around this topic, visit day 5 on the rePRO website, and that website is repromamafilm.org. That's repromamafilm.org. Please make plans to support rePRO Film Festival by purchasing film tickets and attending more of their call to action conversations. You can get full info at the repromamafilm.org website, as I just mentioned. And don't forget that all ticket sales are donated to reproductive justice advocacy organizations. That is major. So when you buy a ticket, you are actually helping to support all of the incredible work that these women are doing. So thank you all so much for joining me.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank
Great
you.
meeting everybody. Thank you.